I was 18 when I had my first abortion. I got pregnant the very first time I had sex. I wish somebody had told me that the first time I had sex I would get pregnant. I wish that somebody had told me that that man who I thought was my knight in shining armor would end up betraying me and his child in choosing not to father or be a part of that baby's life. I also wish somebody would have told me that the $300 that I paid for that abortion didn't make my life simpler or solve my problem as I was told it would, but it would actually cause me more complications. My choice was being based on being frightened, being shocked, very self-seeking, deserving, irresponsible, and worried about what my parents or my neighbors or my friends might think. And yet my parents tell me today that if I had been honest with them and told them, they probably would have understood and helped me raise my son. I wish somebody would have told me that life is about choices, and the pro-choice that I was making would actually turn out to be a poor choice. I wish somebody had told me that Planned Parenthood and family planning wouldn't know the first thing about caring for one of their patients. And I wish somebody would have told me that I could have gotten off the table when I realized it was too late or that I was making a mistake. The procedure was not like the removal of a tooth. I don't regret going to the dentist. And I wish somebody would have told me that I would have felt appalled by with myself after the procedure as I walked out the back door of the clinic. I wish somebody would have told me that there was so much physical and emotional pain involved, not just then, but 23 years later, and that one day I would truly regret the choice I was making. I wish somebody had told me that not only would I blame myself for my own abortion, but for the abortion that I was involved with when I drove my girlfriend to get hers. I wish somebody had told me that grief, guilt, and shame would take over my life emotionally, and that at each anniversary date I would feel numb and unable to move, and that I would later consider suicide twice based on the fact of my choice. I wish someone had showed an ultrasound to me so that I knew that my fetus really wasn't just a blob of tissue, because when 7 years later I was pregnant with my son Davis, who is now 17, the hardest part of being pregnant with him was watching the ultrasounds every month and seeing something grow inside of me, which I knew I terminated 7 years prior. I wish someone had told me that I would never be able to have other children after being raped and having a second abortion when my son was 2. I also wish somebody had told me that I would be forced to have an emergency hysterectomy due to the complications that was caused to my uterus after the second abortion. I wish someone had told me that my life would just be completely different. I'm glad that when I finally did admit my sin and go through a recovery program, that there was healing in Christ and that I could be forgiven for the sins that I committed. That an accepting hearts and compassion of a few select women could assist in the healing of my disgrace. And that healing program would release me from 23 years of guilt and shame and grief. You know, I'm glad that somebody did tell me that God was in the room with me during my abortions. He held my hand through both procedures and personally carried my children home to heaven, because that vision keeps me going every day. And that through God I could name my children, Dylan and Dory, and that they could be with me every day here on earth in my thoughts. And that when I finally get to heaven, Dylan and Dory won't remember why I haven't held them, hugged them, or kissed them. And I'm glad somebody told me that someday I would be blessed to talk about my unborn children to young men and women in high schools and colleges, to congregations and fundraisers and awareness events, and even to my very own son, who by doing so would commit his life to Christ and the miracle of defending life itself. I'm glad somebody told me to share this all with you.
God protected me from having an abortion. He gave me an awareness of the value of life. However, I did suffer because of abortion. When I was a teenager, my mother asked me to go with her to an abortion clinic. This was in Cuba, where abortion was very, very common. And the same doctors that we saw at the clinic had a private office where they did abortions, even though abortion on demand was not legal in Cuba at that time. I begged my mother not to abort that child. I did everything that I could. I said to her, I will raise it, Mom. And I was only a teenager, an adolescent. I will raise it. I will take care of it for you. And she smiled and she said, well, what would people think? Look how old you are already. And I remember sitting in that clinic inside and waiting for her to finish and just wondering what I could have done more. I was not a Christian. I didn't have any pictures to show her. I didn't really know how bad abortion was. In my heart, I felt that it was something bad, but I never really knew until I saw the pictures. And I never really knew for many years how much anger I had inside of me against my mother. It took years. We were never close after that. I attempted suicide shortly after that. And most of my life, I felt that I had to really be the best at everything because I had to make it worthwhile that she allowed me to be born. I later found out that she had aborted other children. And every time we sat at the dinner table, I would look and think about those that were not there. There is tremendous pain when you are a sibling and your mother aborts. And I'm sure that there are many people out there that are feeling this pain. I gave my testimony to a group of people last night, and several people came up to me and said something similar. I got involved in the pro-life movement, and I have been in it for over 30 years. And when I first saw the abortion pictures, when I saw the one about the DNC baby that comes out in pieces, that's the type of abortion that was done in Cuba. And a voice, interior voice, said to me, that's what your brother looked like when he was aborted. And I wrote a letter to the brother that I have not met, that I will meet in heaven. Brothers and sisters, abortion hurts. For years, I went through post-abortion syndrome. I didn't know that you could go through post-abortion syndrome if you haven't had an abortion yourself, but I did. I have a type of cancer that is very deadly, and my sister lives in Fort Myers. My brother lives somewhere else. I would have had a brother or a sister to help me through this difficult time that I'm going through. And I lost most of my family to abortion. My mother had 8 abortions. And my mother realized what she had done when she saw one of my presentations. It was a great pain for me to have her present. I never told her how bad it was, but she came to one of my presentations and she saw what abortion is. And she used to say to me, if only I had known. I love all my children. If only somebody had told me, if only I had known. Till the day she died, she regretted her abortions. God bless you.
My name is Susan, and I'm from Missoula, Montana. Abortion hurts women. That's why I'm here today, to testify the truth I know, the personal story way. My abortion hurts me more than I in words can say. 32 years later, I haven't forgotten the pain of the surgical procedure and how I'd gone astray. I clung to the nurse's arm as the, quote, pregnancy was suctioned from me. I laid there in shock. Blood was all I could see. In recovery, a few minutes later, the abortion doctor came into the room. A dark cloud of death hung overhead had I met my doom. He sat down beside me, and with compassion, it seemed, he told me all went well. I should have no trouble with future pregnancies, he came to tell. In a moment of relief, I thought everything would be all right. From that point on, though, I was really uptight. The drive back to Montana was one of silence. I was numb. Back at my apartment that night, I realized what I had done. It seemed so simplistic as I went along with the plan to hide my sin of sex outside of marriage with this man. He promised we would have children when the time was right, and stupid me, to save the relationship, I put up no fight. I gave him my virginity and the only child I would conceive. The dream of having children eluded me, that gift I would never receive. How could my life continue? The guilt, the shame, the grief, physically, emotionally, spiritually affected. For me, death would be a relief. Suicide is common in lives tormented by abortion grief. It is most certainly true that the devil is a thief. On Mother's Day Sunday, just 6 months later, God's plan for me would unfold. A sermon on the prodigal son text, my story told. Even though neither the pastor nor my parents knew the story was about me, I took it to heart, confessed my sins, and I was set free. That day, post-abortion healing for me began as I realized God knew everything about me and still had a plan. There would be no children when the time was right. How could I bear it? I put up no fight. Abortion made legal isn't the answer. So many women suffering silently in pain. Nothing have the generations since Roe versus Wade had to gain. Trying to make sense of life after my abortion, to God's word I went. Forgiveness, comfort, understanding, for me, God meant. Several years later, I met my husband. We chose not to talk about the past. And the subject of abortion came up one day, and when I told him I had had one, he was aghast. So now 4 lives had been affected. Abortion isn't as simplistic as it seems. There are many victims, young and old. Today's decisions may be the death of tomorrow's dreams. You won't just get over it, as some may tell you to, and you may never have the kind of marriage relationship you'd hoped for or the children you'd longed for too. You may become an abortion instead of a mother or wife, and you will regret it the rest of your life. Marriages hang in the balance as abortion is rampant these days. I have cause to wonder what part abortion plays. Working with the post-abortive has brought joy and gratitude to the depths of my soul. No more will I be silent. God wants every woman wounded by abortion to be made whole. Psalm 147:3 says, He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. If you have had an abortion, there is hope for you. God forgave me, and He wants to forgive you too.
And I'm speaking to you today because I regret the abortion that I had in 1974. It was the cruelest decision I have ever made. It was cruel to my husband, who would not talk me out of it, who could not talk me out of it, and who would go through life wondering, as Miguel, was it a girl or a boy? It was cruel to our only daughter, who was 18 months old, who was going to miss her brother and sister very much as she grew up alone. It was cruel to my brother and sisters and my parents, who would be forever deprived of a niece or a nephew or a grandchild. But the one who suffered abortion's cruelty the most was myself. If I had taken a razor blade to my wrist or swallowed a bottle of pills, the damage to myself would have resulted in my own death. But I did not die from my abortion. My baby did. My death came slowly afterward, as I drifted into self-destructive behavior that somehow would justify my own inhumanity to my child. I was not only trying to destroy myself, but everybody that loved me. Because how could anyone love or forgive a woman who kills her own child? I went even so far as to sterilize myself at the age of 30, so that I would not have to come to terms with the little person that was waiting for me in heaven. The thought of another pregnancy terrified me. Loving another child and being loved by that child was something I did not deserve. As the years went by, my wall of silence surrounding my second child began to break down. God was calling me from outside of the prison I had made in my heart. I felt compelled to reach out to other women and girls to tell them the truth about the choice of abortion. I began to work at a birthright crisis pregnancy center on FM 1960 in Spring, Texas. I felt somehow that I had been given a second chance. I shared with hundreds of scared women and girls why they should give themselves and their babies a chance to live. How the sound of the vacuum would haunt them forever. I showed them what the baby actually looked like in their tummy. My own baby, however, remained an elusive nightmare hidden in my heart. How could I ever know that God would work a healing in me that I would never suspect or ask for? Our only daughter was 17 years old, and I suspected that she was pregnant. We ran the test, and it confirmed her dad's and my fears. She was indeed pregnant. The psalm, "The sins of the fathers would be visited on the sons," blared in my brain. I told my little girl my darkest secret about my abortion and hoped it would dissuade her from ending the life of her baby and ruining her own. The father of the baby and Planned Parenthood used all their lies to convince her that abortion was the only rational thing to do because of her age. And by the way, she was a minor at the time. The abortion was scheduled for May the 11th. On the night of May the 10th, I finally began to mourn the loss of my own baby and the grandchild that I thought that I would never see. The identity of my own child came racing finally into my heart. Our daughter went down to the Planned Parenthood abortuary on Fannin in Houston for her scheduled abortion. But God had other ideas for this young mother and her baby, as well as her grandma. The doctor inserted the suction aspiration machine into her uterus the standard 3 times. She was 11 weeks pregnant. They sent her home bleeding and in a lot of pain. What they did not suspect that the doctor missed the baby entirely. God placed his hand inside her uterus and said, "Not this one, not this time." Her due date was December the 25th. And as I gazed down into the eyes of this precious miracle, I saw the face of all God's unborn children. I saw the face of my child, and I knew I was forgiven. Abortion is about maiming the deepest and strongest instinct of a woman or a young girl. Even when you think you cannot be forgiven, remember, he will never...
When I was 13, I got pregnant. And for months I didn't realize anything was wrong because my period was not regular at that time. When I did go to the doctor, she told me I was 5 months pregnant. My parents convinced me that an abortion was the only answer. Because I was so far along in the pregnancy, I had to fly to Kansas to have the abortion. The procedure took 5 days. Every morning my dad would drive our car through the crowd of protesters gathered around the gates as they screamed at me, held signs of dead fetuses, and banged on my window. During the 5-day procedure, my cervix was slowly forced to dilate, which caused the worst cramps I've ever felt. On the 4th day, as I lay on an examination table, my baby began to kick frantically, more than she had ever before. I didn't realize what was going on, but somehow she knew. The doctor entered with a large needle that he had shot into my belly. After that, I never felt my baby move again. The next morning, I entered a large room with about 5 other women. We were all placed in our own hospital beds and hooked up to an IV that was meant to put us in a twilight state of consciousness. Unfortunately, I remember every detail of the experience. I was freezing, shaking, cramping, and alone. Someone gave me 2 little pills I thought would make me feel better, but instead they forced me into labor. The nurse walked down the baby killing assembly line to see if we were dilated, and then one by one took us off into a separate room. When it was my turn, I was surprised to enter a small room with what seemed to be a toilet. I was told to sit on the toilet, lean on the nurse, and push. So I did. I pushed my dead baby out into a toilet. After all this trauma, I lay on another examination table waiting for the doctor, and a nurse placed her hand on my stomach and said with a smile, "Look how skinny you are now." I just cried. For weeks after the procedure, I was severely depressed. I rarely got out of bed. My body was bleeding and confused because it thought I should have a baby, but there was no baby to care for. Eventually, I did get out of bed, but I battled depression to this day, and I have been suicidal many times in my life. I have used drugs and alcohol. I was promiscuous. I had very little self-worth and developed bulimia. I hated my parents and rebelled in any way I could. I have been in therapy since the abortion, and within the last couple years, I have made a lot of progress. I was caringly persuaded to attend a Rachel's Vineyard retreat in April 2005. This retreat changed my life because although I have always heard God forgives you, I never felt it like I did on the retreat. His mercy was falling like rain all around me, but I had an umbrella up. The retreat helped me to fold my umbrella, and when I did, I was drenched in the forgiveness God was pouring out all along. Being with the other woman helped a lot as well. I saw that other women had made the same mistake I did, and I didn't condemn them, so I realized I needed to stop condemning myself. People need to know that the babies our country allow to be murdered every day are not lumps of mass, but living children with souls and worth. I felt my baby move inside of me. She had a personality. I left that baby dead in a toilet, and my story is multiplied day after day, baby after baby. It is absurd to think that abortion is a solution to any problem. The hurt and pain doesn't end after the baby is gone. I had thought I would just get over it. We are told as women we have a choice, but no one explains what we are choosing. I doubt many would choose to feel the way I have for the last 10 years, so that is why I am silent no more.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, and this is my first March for Life, and I pray for all of us that this is our last. You know, you're going to hear a lot of testimonies, and I've heard several here from women referring to the guy in their life that played a role in their abortion. I'm here today because I was that guy. About 26 years ago, after a tour in the Army and in my first year of college, I got a girl pregnant. One of us was in love, and it wasn't me. I bought into the lies that by writing an inexpensive check, my problem could easily go away. And I used all the common excuses and lies that we were told. And this was my reasoning for not living up to my responsibility. I was still in college, I was too young, no money, and of course I knew that we had no future together. Besides, it's only a blob of tissue. That was the biggest lie, and that was the closer on how I distanced myself from that actual act that was about to be done. And by being the guy, it gave me the added advantage to distance myself by even farther. I did not have to go through the process that you're hearing these ladies describe today. All I had to do was drive her to the clinic and pick her up afterward. We never talked about it after that, and neither did I for 26 years, never a word. Because of those lies, it was easy to bury. About 10 years ago now, when I came back to my faith and got married, it was then that I truly realized what I had done. When the doctors told my wife and I that we could not have our own children, the emotions and that guilt came pouring in. Was I being punished for not protecting my first child? As a man, we are called to be the protectors, especially of the young. But because of those lies, I ran away from that responsibility. I murdered that child, my child. No semantics, no excuses, no lies can defend or describe it as anything other than that. And I regret my lost fatherhood. But I was not being punished, and I have been forgiven. First, I've been able to forgive myself. My wife has willingly and quickly forgiven me. And God has forgiven me. Here's the good news, too. The doctors were wrong. Okay. We've been blessed with two beautiful children, Olivia and Benjamin, and I have a third that I know I will see again. I will always be that guy, but I'm also a man that no longer believes the lies, and I will also be silent.
Mi decisión de hacerme un aborto fue un acto de cobardía del que me arrepentiré por el resto de mi vida. El temor a mi madre, a la vergüenza que le causaría lo que sus amigas dijeran, y el mal ejemplo que sentaría para mis hermanos menores, me dominaron. Unido a esto, la urgencia del doctor de que no podía esperar un día más. Supuestamente en mi país, Nicaragua, los abortos no se dan, porque estos se hacen en cualquier clínica. Ningún doctor que se precie de ser un buen doctor quiere ser conocido como un aborcionista. Es un país de mucha religiosidad, y en nuestros pueblos latinos nunca se permitiría una clínica de aborto abiertamente. Aunque no recibí más información que decirme que era urgente, me dijo que no necesitaba saber nada de mí. Sin embargo, cuando me aplicaban la anestesia local, alguien me preguntaba mi nombre, me preguntaba el nombre de mis padres, me preguntaba el nombre del bebé que estaba abortando, me preguntaban por mi trabajo. Luego sentí que todo fue bien rápido. Por instrucciones del doctor, alguien tenía que venir conmigo. Luego que me desperté, sentía que convulsionaba, sentía tristeza, sentía dolor. Mi amiga incluso sentía que tal vez había valido la pena que de alguna manera me quitara la idea. Sentí que alguien más sollozaba en la penumbra. Cuando salí de la clínica era otra persona completamente distinta que la que había entrado. Estaba herida, me volví una persona huraña, arisca, incluso a las expresiones cariñosas. Cargaba un gran peso en mis espaldas. Me volví una persona desconfiada, agresiva verbalmente, celosa. Confesaba mi falta una, otra y otra vez y no sentía el perdón, no alcanzaba a experimentar el perdón. Mi esposo y yo incluso fuimos a encuentros matrimoniales y hablamos con un sacerdote juntos. La infidelidad conyugal invadió y zarandeó fuertemente nuestro matrimonio. Llevamos 30 años casados. Finalmente, luego de un estudio bíblico largo, doloroso, pero completamente restaurador, pude recibir una nueva unción, encontrar un nuevo amor por mi esposo, experimentar la total sanación y liberación que solamente puede encontrarse en Jesús. He sido perdonada y liberada. Y quiero decirles que si Dios dice ser quien es seguro que Él lo es, porque yo lo he experimentado. He elegido hacer mi testimonio en español porque quiero alcanzar a jóvenes, adultos, hombres y mujeres que hablan o que entienden el español. Como hispana, conozco que estas cosas nunca se dicen en público. Como solemos decir los latinos, los trapos sucios se lavan en casa. Somos enseñados en que una vez confesado el pecado, todo queda entre tú y Dios. Pero ¿cuántas personas se atreven a confesar lo que sabemos, pensamos en ese momento que Dios no puede perdonar nunca? No matarás. Pero yo tengo buenas noticias para todos aquellos que han pasado por esta experiencia. Nuestro Señor Jesús dijo: vengan a mí todos los que están cansados, porque mi yugo es ligero. Y Él dice: yo no te condeno tampoco. Levántate y no peques más. Tu pecado te ha tenido demasiado tiempo en una prisión. No has vivido una vida feliz pensando que desmembraste tu familia, que privaste a tus hijos de un hermano, que negaste a tus padres de un nieto, que dejaste este mundo corto de un maestro, de un sacerdote quizás, de un pastor o un misionero, de un artista o hasta de un doctor. Pero a Dios no lo has tomado por sorpresa. Tu libre albedrío te lo puso Dios, aunque tú lo hayas ejercitado de manera equivocada. Él te lo concedió. Te digo yo hoy que lo mejor de tu vida es lo que viene. Si traes tu carga al pie de la cruz y resometes tu vida al Salvador. Porque no se trata de lo que tú hiciste, se trata de lo que Jesús hizo por ti. Tampoco se trata de lo que has hecho. Somos pecadores. Se trata de quién es Él. Él es Dios y Él todo lo puede. ¿Cuál es tu posición? Yo te invito a que no calles más. Libérate, porque por su gracia hemos sido sanados y la gracia de Él me ha alcanzado. He sido perdonada y liberada. Y como dijo David cuando perdía a su hijo, Él no puede volver a mí, pero yo voy a ir a Él algún día. Gracias.
Bonjour, mon nom c'est Chantal. Je vais faire mon témoignage en français, puis essayer de le faire un petit peu en anglais après. I will do it in English a little bit after. Vraiment, aujourd'hui, je me sens honorée d'être ici parce que je sais que c'est grâce au Seigneur, c'est grâce à la guérison qu'il a fait dans mon cœur. Je me tiens ici aujourd'hui, c'est parce que vraiment dans mon cœur, je regrette d'avoir vécu l'avortement, mais en même temps aussi parce que j'ai la conviction que le Seigneur a guéri mon cœur. Il a restauré ma vie. Il y a environ 20 ans, alors que j'avais à peine 20 ans, je suis devenue enceinte et puis je me suis retrouvée seule. J'étais toute seule. J'avais aucune aide, j'avais pas de maison, j'avais pas de travail. Et pour moi, l'avortement était la seule solution qui était devant moi. Pourtant, j'aime les enfants, pourtant je viens d'une famille où je suis la 8e. Et je me suis trouvée devant ce choix qui a été difficile. Mais en même temps, je me sentais tellement désespérée que j'ai quand même subi l'avortement. Je n'avais aucune connaissance des conséquences spirituelles, des conséquences physiques que cela allait apporter dans ma vie à ce moment-là. Et lorsque j'ai vécu l'avortement, les jours qui ont suivi, j'ai fait des cauchemars, je me suis sentie coupable, j'ai eu honte, sans même connaître Dieu. Ces choses, ces sentiments étaient profondément dans mon cœur. Et j'ai marché pendant des années avec ces sentiments, avec ce fardeau de culpabilité, ce fardeau de honte. Et je ne savais pas quoi faire avec ce fardeau, avec ces sentiments dans mon cœur. Et un jour, quelqu'un m'a parlé de Jésus, quelqu'un m'a témoigné de l'amour de Dieu. Et j'ai donné ma vie au Seigneur et le Seigneur a vraiment guéri mon cœur. J'ai vraiment ressenti qu'il me pardonnait. J'ai vraiment confessé. Parce que j'avais fait l'avortement. C'était par ignorance, mais c'était un péché. Et j'ai senti que Dieu guérissait mon cœur. Mais il y a une année, exactement, je suis venue en ce lieu pour la première fois. Je n'avais aucune connaissance de la marche pour la vie. Je ne savais même pas qu'à ce moment-là, j'étais enceinte de mon 4e enfant. Maintenant, j'ai 4 enfants. Merci Seigneur. Et puis, j'étais ici. Ça faisait 6 mois que j'avais planifié d'être ici. Et puis, je suis venue à cet événement. Et j'ai senti que le Seigneur me disait dans mon cœur, Chantal, je t'ai pardonné. Mais toi, tu n'arrives pas à te pardonner. Et c'était vrai. Fait que pendant plusieurs années, j'avais de la difficulté, je n'arrivais pas à me pardonner. Tellement j'avais honte, tellement je regrettais, tellement j'avais mal, que je me sentais coupable. Et puis, pendant que j'étais dans la foule, je me suis mise à pleurer quand j'écoutais les témoignages. J'étais prise avec ces sentiments. J'étais vraiment liée. Et le Seigneur a guéri mon cœur. J'ai senti la liberté vraiment dans mon cœur venir, la libération, la guérison, la délivrance. Et j'ai dit, Seigneur, si un jour tu permets que je puisse témoigner de ce que tu as fait dans ma vie, si un jour tu permets que je puisse marcher pour la vie, Seigneur, fais-le, je te donne ma vie. Et aujourd'hui, je suis là, je me tiens, c'est vraiment avec joie. Quand j'ai reçu un téléphone me demandant de venir, j'ai simplement pu dire oui. Parce que je veux rendre témoignage aujourd'hui que Jésus est celui qui guérit, que le Seigneur, que Dieu guérit, que Dieu pardonne, que Dieu restaure. Il restaure complètement. Et il y a un verset que j'aimerais simplement vous laisser. C'est dans le psaume 36, 10. Ça dit, « Tu es la source de la vie. Et par ta lumière, nous voyons la lumière. Et à l'ombre de tes ailes, nous pouvons prendre refuge. »
Hi, my name is Linda Menon, and I'm from Edmonton, Alberta. It was the early 1970s. I was 18 years old, and I was pregnant. My relationship with the baby's father had ended, and my own parents were getting a separation. Abortion seemed to be the easiest thing to do at the time, to deal with all the things that were going on in my life. My mom arranged for everything. The doctors said that it would be a simple, painless, 10-minute procedure, and that afterward I'd be able to get on with my life as if nothing had ever happened. Those words could not be further from the truth. After my abortion at the Women's College Hospital in Toronto, I woke up in the recovery room crying. I can remember saying to my mom, "I don't understand why I feel so sad. Why does it hurt so much?" I emerged from that healing institution with an invisible wound. A wound that went so deep that it would affect me for the rest of my life. I was different now. I was damaged. I was less than. I now had to hide this inadequacy. The sadness didn't go away. My life was plagued with bad relationships, depression, drinking to numb the emotional pain. 2 more abortions followed. One as a result of a pregnancy caused by an incestuous rape. Years later, when I finally married, I wanted a family, but I was unable to conceive. It's not fair. All those people like Planned Parenthood, they said, you can have a child whenever you want to, when it's convenient for you. But when I wanted to, it wasn't to be. I can remember being in situations where I would be confronted with women who had just recently had babies. And sometimes I would be invited to baby showers from girls that I worked with. And I can just remember having these awful feelings inside that would just say, "You're not a nurturer, you're a murderer." And I would have to live with these feelings. My battle with infertility led me to despair. I had to face the truth that I had killed the only children that I would ever conceive. I decided that suicide was the only answer. That night, a supernatural encounter with the living God derailed my attempt to take my own life. And it started a journey toward healing, reconciliation, and restoration that continues to this day. Jesus guided me to sensitive, compassionate women who led me through post-abortion healing. I was able to forgive myself and begin to grieve for the children that I had lost. And now that deep sense of sadness is gone. I will see my children one day. For the time being, they're with Jesus. God was gracious in my life, and He allowed me to adopt a wonderful little baby girl from Romania. She's now 6 years old, and she's at home with her dad in Edmonton. And I praise Him every day when I wake up in the morning and I go in her bedroom, and I get her ready for school. What I want you to walk away with today is the knowledge that abortion doesn't make anything better. It doesn't make all your current problems go away. It's just an open door to a far greater pain and distress than anyone had ever bargained for. Young women of Canada, please don't choose abortion. you will live to regret it.
My name is Leslie Graves, and I'm from Wisconsin. I'm glad you're all here. From a very early age, I wasn't just pro-choice, but I also thought that abortion was a reasonable and probably the right thing for a woman to do who wanted to achieve equality, have a career, and take advantage of her education. So before I was ever in an unexpected pregnancy, I would have known that I would have and choose an abortion. As soon as I got pregnant when I was 20, I was in graduate school in philosophy. I immediately scheduled an abortion. It was a very physically safe abortion. It was a very kind, caring staff, a clean, nice clinic. So it was certainly quite inexplicable to me why 2 months later I couldn't get out of bed in the morning because I was so depressed. I didn't understand why I ended up dropping out of graduate school later that semester. And I certainly didn't understand why a few months later I turned to my boyfriend with whom I had had the abortion and said, you know, let's get married. And I chose as our wedding date the weekend that our child would have been due. And because that was the only way that this still small voice inside me that affirms life knew how to acknowledge and memorialize my child at that time. So as life went on, I was still very pro-choice. I didn't know why I was starting to hate myself. I didn't know why whenever I was pregnant again, and I would be 2 and 3 months pregnant, I would wake up every morning and think that I probably should kill myself. So I would feel suicidal throughout my pregnancies. And when my babies were born, much as I adored and loved them, I would wonder why I felt as if there was an invisible wall between us. So my experience is that that still small voice that we are all born with that knows that life is sacred, in spite of whatever ideologies we may embrace when we're young and foolish, is still there and it speaks through us. And I'm sorry that Georgette started crying because now I might. The only thing, it's been a wonderful day, but the only thing that I wanted to say is that there's, as Helen Keller said, there's a great deal of suffering in this world, but there's also a great deal of overcoming. But when I saw that sign that said every child is wanted, what I needed to say about that is that we all still want our children, but they're gone.
Hi, my name is Quinty. 3 years ago, I made the decision that I will always regret, the only decision that I've ever regretted in my life. I aborted my son, Matthew. I had just graduated from UCI, and I had gotten pregnant. I felt so alone and worried, and what was I to do? My boyfriend wasn't ready to be a dad, and I was too scared to do it alone. I decided to get an abortion because it seemed like my only choice. I didn't have a job that would adequately support myself, let alone a child, so I thought the abortion was the most logical and sensible choice. Little did I know that I would one day be haunted by that choice. The abortion provider told me that it was a quick and easy procedure with little side effects. I would be in and out in no time. What they didn't tell me was that I would go through such deep depression for the next 2.5 years. They didn't tell me that I would try to commit suicide twice within a couple of months, that I would be an emotional wreck, or that I would have constant anxiety and panic attacks and migraines that can only be controlled through medicine. They never told me that I would take a year and a half off of work to get professional help in order to get back to what seemed like a normal life. Before my abortion, I was a confident person who was ready to take on the world. I know what I wanted, and that was to have a family, and that American dream that everybody seeks. I was happy and outgoing. After the abortion, I became so depressed. I worried about everything, even the smallest detail of life. I no longer look forward to the future and no longer look forward to going out with friends. I became petrified of the thought of having any children of my own. I lost all interest in life and began to pull away from my family and friends. Fortunately, with the encouragement and support of my wonderful husband, Stephen, I got help. I went through a post-abortion recovery class through my church. With their help, I found forgiveness through God and worked through the issues associated with my abortion. With their support, I am able to stand in front of you today and tell you my story. Just 6 months ago, I could barely talk about it without being hysterical, but now I can stand in front of you and talk to you. You may think that you won't have to worry about it once it's over and done with. Just because you leave the clinic does not mean that it's over, but it's only just begun. I never thought that it would affect me so deeply, but it did. It will affect you physically, mentally, and spiritually. You may also think that it only affects you, but it also affects those around you who care for and love you the most. It affects everyone, both men and women. It will destroy your spirit and your will to live. It did mine.
It was my 17th birthday. I missed school that day and my friend drove me to the hospital. I was admitted and put into a ward with other young ladies who were waiting for their abortions. Later, I was wheeled into the operating room and put under general anesthetic. I woke up bleeding, in pain, nauseated, and had a very large telltale bruise where the IV had been. Late that afternoon, I was released. My friend picked me up to drive me home. We arrived at my home to my 17th birthday party. My whole family was there. I hid my hand to avoid any questions about the bruise. No one knew that night, as they celebrated the day I was born, that I had taken the life of my first child. It didn't end here. I had 2 more abortions after this. Abortion appeared to be the easy way out. I could get on with my life. I viewed it as a solution to a problem. However, what seemed like the easy way out became a double-edged sword of negative physical and emotional consequences. Abortion isn't a safe procedure. It is a surgery with risks. I experienced hemorrhaging, intense cramping, infection, and fever. There are many other risks and complications to abortion. Emotionally, I suffered from deep depressions, breakups with boyfriends, guilt, shame, anger, fear, and a sense of enduring worthlessness. When I did have a child, I found that it was difficult to fully bond with her for quite some time, and I also experienced sexual problems in my marriage. What looked like the easy way out on the outside led to my destruction on the inside. What I thought was the best choice at the time, in reality, it was the worst. There is a way that seems right to men, but in the end it leads only to death. Abortion for me was a secret sin that kept me in bondage to a cycle of sexual sin. I started on the road to healing by taking the first step of repentance by God's grace, and through God's strength by breaking the cycle of promiscuity and abortion, and by receiving God's complete forgiveness, mercy, and grace. By recognizing abortion as a loss of life, and by being able to grieve these profound losses caused by my own selfish choices, I was restored emotionally by going through a post-abortion Bible study and set free from guilt and shame by God's abundant grace. Through restitution, God has given me opportunity to help take other women who have been hurt by abortion through a post-abortion Bible study, because it is only in God that hope is given and healing is found. And I also want to be silent no more. I was driving one day and listening to a pastor on the radio, and he said something that really touched my heart. He said, there is more grace in God's heart than there is sin in your past. Thank you.
It was about 21 years ago that I had an abortion. I was raped, and I can honestly tell you that I regret my abortion. The man that raped me was somebody I knew. A few weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. I felt like I wanted to die because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. So I called my mom, who was living in Los Angeles at the time, and I told her I wanted to come see her. So she sent me the ticket to come to America. I decided not to tell my mom the news about my pregnancy, but my sister figured it out because she saw me throwing up. So one cold morning, my mom stormed me into the room and told me to get ready. She screamed many things at me, but she specifically said, I have talked to many people, and they say that there's nothing inside. I'm taking you to an abortion clinic. I cried when the nurse took me away to the operating room. I didn't know what to do. I was in a strange country, didn't speak the language, and didn't know where to turn. They put me to sleep, so I didn't feel anything. 2 weeks later, when I came back to the abortion clinic, the nurse told me I had had a baby boy. It was then that I realized that what my mom had said was a lie. I had killed a real baby. Living
My life with this kind of guilt has not been easy. I blame myself 100% for what happened, even the rape. And at one time I considered suicide. I wish I would have had a choice. I wish I would have given my baby up for adoption. I wish I would have given my baby a chance to live. I was left with no hope, no dreams, no future. Just September 2003, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. The type of cancer I have is not related to my genes or my hormones. I wonder if the research that has been done to relate breast cancer to abortion is true in my case. Years ago, I talked to my mom about this abortion. She cried and she said to me, "I thought you forgot about it." I can honestly tell you today, that's the only thing in life I would never forget it happened. Today, I'm standing here because I know that God has forgiven me, and I've been able to forgive myself and forgive those that hurt me.
Hi, my name is Barbara. I'm from Boise, Idaho. The year was 1985. I was 17 years old and I had just graduated from high school. I had hopes and dreams to go on to college with a scholarship, to go to med school, pre-med and medical school. And I just had this incredible hope for the future. Then one day I found out that I was pregnant. After really just thinking it over and looking at what I thought were all the options, I decided to have my baby. I didn't think my boyfriend would have a problem with it, but to my surprise, the day that I told him, all of that came crashing down. He could not believe that I would even consider having the child. After going through the discussion with him, and also after my father, who loved his daughter very much and knew that she had all these hopes and dreams, he convinced me and my boyfriend that abortion was my best choice. So my mom one day drove me to the abortion clinic. And I can tell you, for several months after that, I can't recall a single day. But that day is so vivid in my mind that I will never forget it. I laid on the table. And I can tell you, the nurse, she had blonde hair, white lab coat. The doctor, gray hair, gray beard, white lab coat. And I laid there and I was shaking. And I started to cry. And I looked at the nurse and I said, "I don't want to do this. I've changed my mind." The doctor got annoyed with me. He said, "Oh, that's normal. You'll get over it." And then he said, "It's too late." And we know that that's a lie now. It wasn't too late. After that, I fell into this incredible despair. I stepped into the abyss. I turned to drugs. I turned to alcohol to try to mask the pain that I was feeling and to escape from this incredible grief, because the day that I killed my daughter, I also killed myself. That day, a part of me died. My innocence and my hope was gone. It took me 18 years to come to a place where I understood what my abortion had done to me. It took 2 marriages, because I married twice, not because I was in love and I thought that I would be there for the rest of my life, but because I was trying to fill this incredible emptiness within me. I was looking for a way, as so many women do, to make my life make sense somehow, to make it better, because I didn't know why I felt the way I did. I didn't know why my life was so different than I had ever imagined it would be. I just knew that deep down that something was incredibly wrong. I've been blessed with 4 wonderful, beautiful children. Absolutely wonderful. My son is here tonight to witness this, and he now stands for life. But I can tell you, after having 2 boys, I thought I was done. As I approached my 30s, I began to yearn to have a daughter as well. But I remember thinking within myself that I would never have a daughter because I had killed the one that I was given originally. And I remember when I became pregnant with my 3rd child after having a miscarriage, I remember praying with all my heart and soul that God would grant me the grace of a daughter. But deep within, I didn't feel that he would, because I was waiting for that incredible punishment. I was waiting to be punished, for him to say, "No, you'll never have a daughter because you killed the one that I gave you." But by the grace of God, he not only gave me one, he gave me two. And now I have two beautiful girls. In May of 2003, May 10th to be exact, Mother's Day weekend, I attended the first Rachel's Vineyard retreat that was held in our state. I went as a helper because when I saw the announcement looking for volunteers, I thought somehow in my head that I could help because I had had an abortion. But this was coming from a woman that had never admitted publicly or to anyone that she'd had an abortion. So God got me there in the guise of being a helper. And I can tell you that weekend changed my life. By the grace of God, I came to know Christ once again in my life. The separation for 18 years that I had had from God was mended and bridged. And I learned that Christ truly does forgive each and every one of us. And he just is calling us back. He wants his daughters back. He wants his sons back. And he's letting us know that now is the time. We need to be silent no more.
My story was one of a young girl that I was engaged and I became pregnant and I was thrilled. I was so excited. And the father of my baby not only did not want that baby, but he harassed me and pressed me and pushed me. Now, my case was this. I could have afforded the baby, but I didn't get the emotional support of the dad. I went to my doctor, I went to my mom and dad and for help. And they told me the lie from the pit of hell, which is the same lie that is told today, that that baby under 3 months gestation was just a blob of tissue. That if the father didn't want it, I could always have another baby. It wasn't even a baby. Now, my parents have changed their mind in the advent of ultrasound. When I would show them working in these campaigns, my parents lived with me, and it just melted my heart that they finally turned to me and said, Jen, if we had known, we would have supported you. I folded. I was responsible for that abortion, but it wasn't a choice I wanted, but I was responsible. So I beat myself up for years. I had self-loathing, low self-esteem. How many ladies have experienced this? That no matter what anybody says, you feel in your heart and your soul there's something wrong. It's a part of you. Well, the fact is that that baby has a different DNA from the day of conception, and it is a baby. Now, here's what we need to do for those of us who have suffered abortion, and not just women, but men as well, that are sorry for that. That there is healing and grace through Jesus Christ. That's the fact. There is healing. And when we go forward, not in silence, not in shame, because silence and secrecy, if abortion's such a nifty idea, why is it such a secret? And so when we go forward and we admit it, and put it out in the light, and through the power of God we are healed, then we become billboards of silent no more to tell the truth to those who are considering abortions, to be effective in our lives, not crippled anymore from the shame that we have done in our life, and realize that we are forgiven. We can pass on the truth to those and offer them assistance emotionally, financially, physically, spiritually, mentally, anything that they need so that they really and truly, finally have a choice. And 80% of those that go in thinking about abortion and see an ultrasound, 80% change their mind for life. So we need to embrace them, not condemn them, lift them up, and help this society, because in God's eyes, this is who we are. And we need to answer to those issues. I know that there are so many people that need to speak tonight. Again, I want to thank you, but I want to tell you that there is life after abortion. For those who had the abortion, I believe in my heart that we will all see our babies in heaven. And that this must stop morally. Thank you